Hi, I'm Mary Kurek, and we are with Craig Fearn. This is Frontrunners Innovate, and we have an innovator with us who is in the mental health and wellness space, and in a really unique way. And so the innovation here is that it's tapping into the business community. And really interesting background, Craig. We really appreciate you being here and sharing this with us, because I really think that having personal experience and moving it forward toward a business is as extraordinary, really. And so we appreciate the fact that you're doing that. First of all, you're in the UK. Where in the UK?
So I'm in a little place called Gwennett, which is in Cornwall. So I'm right down the bottom of the UK.
Awesome. Okay. Well, also tell us a little bit about how you came to do, what you're doing now in the mental health space.
Sure. So I personally suffered from depression, anxiety, panic attacks since about the age of 13. So I went through school and all of my formative years with mental ill health. I'm 43 years old, so that means as I was coming through, mental health was not something that we talked about, and certainly not in a school-aged individual. So I came through school, things didn't really work out the way that I was hoping they would. Went into work, came down with a condition called chronic cluster headache. Unfortunately, that meant that I had to give up the job that I was doing at the time. I went home, and from that point forward, I stayed there for about 18 months. So I suppose I was one of the early lockdown people, except I was about 23 years before I actually needed to do it. So the only times I was kind of leaving home was to go for sort of counselling and things on the NHS. My best mate at the time became the pizza delivery guy who used to turn up once a day with my pizza. And actually, for me, life at the time was not that great. I lived inside four walls. I didn't really interact with anyone outside of the NHS itself. And I used to find myself going for sort of counselling, therapy, and I would go. I'd hear what was said. I'd come away. I'd try it, and for me, it wasn't working. So then I'd go back the next week, and I'd try it again, and then I'd go the next week, and I'd try it. And each time, I'm told to keep going back, keep trying. And in the end, I actually sort of came to this really weird conclusion that it was my fault. And actually, if I was being sent to these people, they must know, how to do this type of stuff. And I must be the only person who it wasn't working for, because I just couldn't get, it just wouldn't work. Towards the end of that period, I attempted suicide twice, because I just couldn't work out where I was, what I was doing. Didn't want to leave the house, didn't want to interact with people. I'd really shut down on an emotional level. And I suppose, I came to a point where the stark sort of decision was actually, are we going to keep going this way, or are we going to actually sort of have a look at it a bit differently and see what we can do? And thankfully, I decided to look at it from a slightly different perspective. And what I started doing was going to these sessions, and I would keep the bits I liked, and I would bin the bits that I didn't. And then I'd find other bits, and then I'd bolt them on. So ultimately, I started creating my own toolkit on how to sort of deal with the issues that I was having in life, while sort of, holding myself together and dealing with the depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, which were still there. And I think at the end of the day, the way I sort of describe it now is that I'm much better at dealing with them. But it doesn't mean that they've disappeared or that they're ever just going to vanish from my life. It just means that actually, I am an awful lot better, but I do still occasionally have a wobble. And that's kind of important to me, that other people, the empathy that comes with that when you're talking to others about mental health and about mental well-being, when you're actually having these sort of discussions and you're able to say, look, I truly get it, because I've come from there, and actually I still go back there every once in a while, but then I use my toolkit, and I come back out again, and I sort of deal with what I need to do. So, through going through that, I decided actually that I would like to sort of do this as a career. And I sort of moved around in various elements. I was doing, or I have been doing, sort of one-to-one sessions with people on a personal level. I've worked with emergency services in the UK to sort of help their staff, and certainly at the moment I'm doing an awful lot of work with nursing staff who are dealing with the pandemic in the UK. So a lot of hours I'm giving for free to sort of look after that side of things. But I also felt that business was an area, and within the corporate world, and within the UK we sort of say we've got the emergency services. So we've got the ambulance crews, we've got the sort of fire brigade, we've got the police, and they can only go so far. And I've always been of the sort of opinion that actually we spend so much time in work that the culture within a workplace can have such a dramatic effect on your outlook on life, that this is the area that if we were going to try drastically to change and innovate, this is the place where the innovation needs to take place to have one of the biggest impacts.
Agreed. And especially now, as we're sort of, some areas are moving back towards getting back to work. Sometimes now the new work environment is so different from what we were experiencing before. And then others are just not able to get back to the type of work environment that they're used to. So I think it's really important that corporations really look at the mental well-being of their staffs. I know some restaurants now that had opened, now they're closing back down because they found one or two of their employees that have tested positive. And so how disheartening to think you're on a roll and then have to backtrack. So I think what you're doing is amazing. So when you are actually engaged to work with a business, what does that scenario look like? How do you start that process with them?
Okay, so my ethos from sort of dealing with my own situation is very much that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to mental well-being, full stop. I just don't believe in the sort of blanket approach to these things. So any business that engages me, I actively invest time in getting to know them. So what is it that is important to them? What are their values? Where do they see themselves in the industry? Where do they want to go? And sort of, what is the overall goal from engaging somebody like me? Is it to drive an internal policy? Is it to provide paperwork? Is it to provide guidance? So, first of all, there's that initial consultation period. And that to me has got to be a very open and honest conversation. Because as we now well know, business has markers to meet, and that we don't have blank checkbooks unless we're very, very lucky and we can sort of work for a Google or an Amazon or something like that. So, it's actually working out what's going to do the most good for the money that we're looking for. And the only way we can do that is by taking a bespoke approach to the company that we're dealing with. So that the first stage of engaging me is actually engaging me in conversation. Let's find out about you, what you want to do, what your company's aspirations are, where things are in the sector, how you want to pull this out. Because actually, a lot of businesses now are championing their credentials within mental well-being, that actually, if you work with us, we are a company that takes mental well-being seriously. And here's the proof that we've got X person involved to come along and do Y. So, that's kind of the first stage.
Well, it's a corporate culture sort of thing. So you and I talked a little bit back about how you can also provide that if they're looking for documentation on how they need to frame a program or something like that for their company that helps to serve that mental wellness piece, that you help to do that. And then from a hands-on perspective, What types of work do you do in that respect?
So, when I was talking about the paperwork, I produce wellbeing charters for companies. Certainly, I've been doing a lot of work recently on things like bespoke wellbeing appraisal tools for individual members of staff that can form part of their yearly appraisal, where they can actually sort of talk about their well-being. So that type of documentation. I've been working a lot recently on training courses and training programs to actually sort of engage a larger sort of a amount of people to actually take them through certain bits and bobs. But I'm also on call. So effectively, I'm the resource that the CEO or the operations manager or the wellbeing manager can get hold of. I've gone into businesses as a non-executive director before from a wellbeing point of view to drive a program. There's lots of different ways that sort of somebody like myself can get involved.
So like you say, it's not a one size fits all for them, but it's also the same for you. No two businesses are going to probably engage you exactly the same way, which is good to be flexible in that regard, because you just don't know, what really the need is out there until you sit down with somebody and find out. And the funny thing is, I think just like anybody who gets a hurt, a boo-boo, and they need to put a Band-Aid on it, they tend to wait till the hurt is there before they decide to do anything about it. So this is one of those proactive approaches that really it's not a fix so much as it is a paradigm shift about how you are looking at your staff and looking after them. So their health and wellness is priority for sure. So you can throw insurance at them all day long, which is wonderful, but why not give them some tools to stay happy and healthy where they are with you? So that's fantastic. So you work globally, correct?
I do. I'm fortunate enough from my little office, or if I'm flown out to see anyone, yes, I do. I go all over the place.
You don't really need to necessarily be on site, but if that were something that was desired, then you can certainly do that. Are you seeing any one thing that's emerging right now with the work that you're doing that is a primary concern for corporations?
I think the biggest sort of the biggest worry is certainly the idea of us coming out of the sort of COVID bubble, and what the world looks like on the other side of that COVID bubble. And for me, it's become apparent that it's massively important to be prepared before it happens, rather than actually sort of wait for it to happen and then try and play catch up. So when you've got staff coming back into work, when they're able to start to actually have your policies, procedures in place on how you're going to look after their mental well-being while they're in the workplace, where the directions are, who they can approach, what the right system is. Again, we go back to that whole proactive rather than reactive approach. A lot of the time, when I'm engaged, it's to work against something that's called presenteeism, which is effectively when very, very stripped down. There's a lot more to it, but it's when someone turns up for work but actually isn't really at work, if that makes sense. So their productivity levels drop significantly because they've got something else on their mind. They're having mental ill health issues. They've got problems at home. So actually that output from them that we would normally expect, and they would actually normally expect from themselves because they want to do a good job, is reduced, and they become very self-conscious about the fact it's reduced, and they don't actually know where they can go or what they can do to sort of sort themselves out there, because there's no direction. So an awful lot of what I've been doing and what I've been seeing is actually putting these policies in place, providing that outlet to individuals so that if they do ever get there, their company has the resources or the direction or the policy that actually they can just access and say, look, if you are feeling like this is where we're going. It is that culture change. It's that person over policy and procedure. It's that ability to sort of say, you know what, you guys are the most important part of everything we do, because without you, we're not here. So we've got to look after you in the best way we can. And the great part about that is if that you look after them, they look after you. And they will stay and they will evolve and they will develop and they will sing the praises of any company that's prepared to invest in them and look after them.
One last question then. If it were me and I was in a situation like that, I'd be concerned, especially in a smaller business environment, as to privacy of data. And so, or just privacy period of whatever's going on. Because certainly people like that that have those issues don't really want to be found out necessarily. They want help, but they don't really want everybody and their brother to know what's going on with them. And honestly, you and I talked about this. Sometimes corporations don't really want people to know or to think that they might have a problem. So the way to get around that is to have the policy and the plan in place before you have a problem and have to call somebody in. But how do you address the privacy issue?
So, sure. So if you create your culture correctly, the privacy issue should decrease, because actually what you've got is a group of individuals who are all there and all buying into this way of working that actually is collaborative and looking after each other. And actually at that point, it's not quite as hard to put your hand up. But even if you did feel difficulty in doing that, there's actually a procedure for you to follow that will be completely confidential and anonymous to allow you to go through these things. And certainly, we work very much with companies to ensure that that sort of goes on. I think the other side of the equation, when you're talking about companies themselves, is the mindset shift. So I was talking earlier about the fact that companies are now starting to come out and trumpet how much work they're doing in mental well-being for their staff. So rather than, if we get the culture right and we get the people right, actually we don't have that issue with people putting their hands up and saying, we had so-and-so to help us with a mental well-being charter or whatever else, because it's actually a positive. It's a positive because you're looking after your staff. It's a positive because you care about the people working for you. It's not a negative because people are going to suffer from mental ill health. It's going to happen. We know this. Some figures say 1 in 4, other figures say 1 in 3. Some people say if you look around your house, there's somebody. So, the point is that if you're a sole trader and you work on your own, you're shouldering the whole business. There's just you to look out for you. So it's important there. If you're a partnership, there's 2 of you, you're feeding off each other. It's important there. If you're a limited company, you've got more staff, whether it be production, accounts, it's important there. We shouldn't be in a position where we're ashamed to say, you know what, I care about my staff that much that I'm prepared to do something about this and make their life better. It shouldn't be a stigma anymore. This should be the way the world works.
Exactly. Well, this is wonderful, Craig. I so appreciate you sharing all this information with us, because I think that everybody who checks out Frontrunners Innovate will agree with you that it's just something that we all have to be paying attention to, more so now than at any other time. Although, we have a pandemic that we're dealing with now, there's other issues around the world that happen that can create this similar sort of situation. And just even as an ongoing basis, I think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that this is just one more check mark in the box of how to look after people that we need to be doing. So thank you very much. Frontrunners Innovate thanks you, and we appreciate it. We'll be talking to you again. All right. Thanks.